When I finally opened my eyes, I couldn't see anything but blackness. Everything was dark. Nothing was more than a shape or a shadow across my eyes that I couldn't figure out. But slowly, my eyes began to fill with the soft, silver light of the full moon. High in the sky above me, I was able to eventually make out some small details in the inky blue night. A rocky shoreline, I thought, and the woods, stretched in front of me like a big wall, full of bushes and shrubs, with ghostly birch trees that seemed to almost glow in the light of the moon, twisting their branches around each other in a way that made it hard to see much at all. I don't know how long I stood there in the quiet. It felt like hours. And I was so cold. Colder than I ever remembered feeling. It felt like my legs had frozen solid, and my body was filling up with ice, like the kind in the slushy machines at Mr. Hammond's general store. I always liked the blue kind the best. I would hold the cup as long as I could, until my fingers got so cold they started to burn a little. I felt my hands twitch at the memory, and slowly brought them up to my mouth to breathe on them, to try and warm them up just like Papa had showed me how to do. But when I looked down at my hands, they looked funny, sort of shimmery and kind of wobbly. It took me a moment before I realized why I was so cold. I was standing in the lake. The water looked so black in the night, it felt like I was standing in nothingness. I looked away from the woods and the pebbled shore to try and see what was behind me, and it was nothing but more water, for as far as my eyes could see, until the water and the sky seemed to melt together. I felt a lump crawl into my throat, but when I tried to let out a sob, there was no sound. I clasped my hands over my ears and shouted. I tried to scream as loud as I could, but no sound would come out of me. I blinked away tears that felt like they were there, but when I touched my eyes, there was nothing. My fingers didn't even feel wet from the lake. Nothing did. Everything just felt cold. How did I get here? The shore was so far away. Did I swim out here all by myself? Papa always told me to stay where my feet could touch, but when I tried to look into the water to see, it was so deep I couldn't even see the bottom. I could barely see my boots under the surface, and yet it felt like I was standing on firm ground. Time started to go all funny, like the stars were moving by really fast, but I wasn't going anywhere with them. I was stuck out here, and no one would ever find me. Fear rushed into me like a wave, and I screamed again, but it was choked out. It felt like my lungs were filled with water, and I couldn't get out a sound because of it. I spun in circles. The shore seemed to be getting even further away, and I was being pulled down and into the darkness, and I just wanted it to stop. I pulled my hands over my eyes and waited for the feeling to go away, hoping it would end before it got so bad I was drowned by it. But it just kept pulling at me, this overwhelming feeling of fear and water and darkness. I could still feel the side of the boat under my fingers, my nails dragging on the wood as I tried to pull myself up, but they couldn't grab onto anything, and my arms felt so weak I couldn't hold on. There was something heavy on my feet, heavy like it was pulling me down on purpose. It felt like I was being crushed, like all the weight in the world was pushing me down into the water until it was in my mouth and my eyes and my ears, and I could feel my feet kicking, trying to swim my way up, but I couldn't tell which way was up or down, and everything started to go quiet with the pressure that was building in my head, and then I heard a soft voice calling to me, and I opened my eyes again. I was still in the lake, but now the shore wasn't so far away. At the edge of the woods, where the trees started to separate, a bluish glow caught my attention. It was bright, and seemed to cut through the darkness like a lighthouse. It was a lantern, although it didn't look like any lantern I had ever seen, and it pulled me towards it like a moth when we leave the porch light on too long. I felt my feet move forward, out of the lake and onto the rocks. I noticed that my footsteps didn't make any noise as I walked, nor did the water splash at my heels. What had only moments earlier felt like a crushing wave trying to swallow me up, now let me pass through easily as if I was walking through air. When I reached the edge of the woods, following the lantern's glow, I found myself staring at a cloaked woman in the dark. She was strange to look at. Her hair was all white and floated around her like she was underwater. She stared at me for a while, looking like she was trying to figure out who I was. Her eyes looked pale and milky, and they made me think that maybe she couldn't see me very well, if at all. But when I got closer, her face changed into an expression that seemed sort of sad, and I could tell in that moment that she was able to see me just fine. Her blue lantern let out these little glowing things that sort of looked like fireflies in the night. It made me smile, and it made my toes start to feel warm at the sight of them. She didn't say anything to me, but knelt down so we could look at each other. I didn't say anything either, but when she reached up to lay her hand softly on my head, it felt like I didn't need to say anything at all. She smiled at me in a kind of sad way, and when she stood up, I was able to catch a glimpse at what was standing behind her. 3 other kids, they all looked around my age, were standing there quietly. They looked kind of odd, all pale and kind of see-through, like I might have been imagining them. One of the boys had a big rip in his pants, and the girl looked like she had taken a really bad fall. Part of her ear was torn, and it looked like she might have been missing a finger. It was hard to tell. The other boy looked familiar, though, although he was younger looking than me. Seeing him made my brain feel foggy, like all my memories were getting jumbled together, and I couldn't remember names or faces very well. I remember something about one of the neighborhood boys being really sick. He was in the hospital for a really long time until last week when I couldn't remember, and trying to think about it made my head start to hurt. The lady with the lantern looked at the other children and then back at me, and then outstretched her hand in my direction. I reached for it, and when I felt her fingers hold my hand, it felt warm and kind and inviting. She turned us all towards the forest, but I didn't feel afraid, and I didn't feel like we would be lost. I felt like we were going the right way, and without a sound, we all started to walk forward into the night.